is my in-depth guide for hero number 29, Ashe. In this guide, I'm going to cover the following topics. First, I'm going to give you an overview of Ashe as a character. After that, I'm going to share how you can decide in the moment if Ashe is the correct pick. Next, I'll go through each of her abilities and share key information, tips and tricks on how to get the most value out of them. Following that, a complete rundown of everything you need to know about her ultimate. Finishing things off, I'm going to teach you how to position as Ashe using a few examples and finally summarize her main win conditions during a game. Ashe is a long-range hit-scan DPS with very high burst damage. This makes her excellent at securing picks before fights and generating numbers advantages. Her ultimate is also one of the strongest DPS ultimates in the game, allowing her to win fights single-handedly. And to finish things off, she's also one of the more mobile characters in the game, thanks to her highly flexible coach gun. Ashe's main downside are her intrinsic inconsistency, given the high mechanical requirements for generating value as Ashe. While Ashe is fairly long range, she is vulnerable to long range pressure, potentially limiting the sidelines she has access to. And lastly, her unique lever action rifle and its individual bullet reloads give her the longest reload time in the game, leading to situations of extended downtime. Let's take a look at Ashe's strengths and weaknesses. I'm evaluating her in 5 categories: burst damage, sustained damage, mobility, ult strength and utility. Ashe has excellent burst damage. Her scoped-in headshots deal significant damage, allowing you to finish off targets before enemies have a chance to heal up. Her sustained damage is surprisingly high with her left click, however, the long reload times punish her for front-loading DPS like that. Her coach gun is a strong mobility tool. While she isn't the most mobile DPS, compared to other picks like Cassidy or Soldier, she has a much easier time repositioning during fights. Her ultimate is extremely strong, among the strongest in the game and being one of the main reasons you'll win most of your games. Her utility is limited, however the knock-up from Bob and her coach gun can situationally be used to disrupt the enemy team, giving her slightly above average utility for the DPS category. Taking a look at Ashe's learning curve, we can see that she follows a traditional logarithmic learning curve, meaning that you'll notice fairly quick progress at the start, while improvement starts to slow down as you move on to more advanced aspects of play. The limit inferior is fairly low, but not quite at 0, meaning that the lower skill ceiling is causing players to generate some, but very little value at no experience with the character. The limit superior, or upper skill ceiling, however, is very high, showing that even as you start to approach very high ranks like Grandmaster or Top 500, you'll still have things to learn and ways to be a cut above the rest. Here we can see the main forms of synergies and counters Ashe has. Ashe synergizes with damage increases such as Mercy's damage boost, Zenyatta's Discord Orb, or Ana's Nano Boost. Not only do they massively amplify the lethality of her scoped-in shots, allowing her to one-shot headshot targets in certain situations, they also increase the amount of ult charge she generates with her dynamite. Ashe also synergizes with hard CC setting up kills for her. Wrecking Ball's Slam, Junkrat's Mines, or Junker Queen's Throwing Knife turn a game of Ashe into a skeet shooting session. Ultimates like Sigma's Gravitic Flux, Mei's Blizzard, or Reinhardt's Earthshatter are excellent setup for her to land headshots. Ashe also benefits from movement speed increases, such as Lucio's Speed Boost aura. Scoping in as Ashe makes you vulnerable. Movement speed increases make you harder to hit, allowing you to experience less pressure while scoped. Ashe's main counters are hard CC. Abilities like Ana's Sleep Dart or Sombra's Hack can completely shut down your ultimate, making one of the most important parts of your kit completely useless, requiring you to track these cooldowns to avoid having your Bob shut down. Ashe also struggles against long-range characters such as Widowmaker, Hanzo or Zenyatta. Your movement speed is significantly slowed while scoped in, making you an easy target. On top of that, your damage falls off over range, giving enemies an edge at long ranges. And lastly, Cleansing effects such as Kiriko's Protection Suzu or Zarya's Bubbles, or individual cleanses like Tracer's Recall or Moira's Fade can significantly limit the amount of ult charge you gain from your dynamite. Keep in mind that Overwatch does not have any hard counters, meaning that all these characters can be played around either through intelligent target selection, cooldown tracking, or smart positioning. On top of that, while the synergies outlined here are strictly advantageous for Ashe, they are in no way mandatory to warrant picking Ashe. Ashe has 2 abilities, 1 ultimate, and 2 firing modes on her gun. She can use her gun, the Viper, to fire high DPS but inaccurate unscoped shots, or scope in to trade rate of fire and mobility for additional damage. Her coach gun is a perfect example of Newton's third law, allowing you to knock both yourself and another player around the map. Her dynamite is a flexible damage over time tool, and the main source of ult charge. And lastly, her ultimate Bob is one of the strongest ultimates in the game, allowing you to turn a 5v5 into a 6v5. Starting things off with Ashe's gun, the Viper. It has 2 firing modes, both semi-automatic and sharing the same ammo pool. Her hip fire dealing up to 40 damage per shot with a maximum spread of 1.85 degrees. It fires at a rate of 3.75 shots per second and can headshot. Her gun holds 12 bullets. When Ashe scopes in, the characteristics of her gun change. Its damage increases to 75, her gun loses its spread, and her rate of fire decreases to around 1.54 shots per second. Her movement speed is slowed by 25% and her FOV is reduced. The first thing you have to do when playing Ashe is head over to the controls section of the settings menu, selecting Ashe specific settings, and changing the relative scope sensitivity to 51.47%. Scoping in changes your field of view, but not your sensitivity, meaning that for your flicks to feel similar between scoped and unscoped shots, we need to change our relative scope sensitivity. This way, average-sized flicks should feel identical, whether you are scoped in or not. Here, we can see Ashe's damage falloff while unscoped. She deals a full 40 damage to a range of up to 20 meters, after which the damage linearly falls off until it reaches its low of 12 damage at 40 meters. This means that her unscoped shots are generally designed to be used at fairly close ranges. Now, let's take a look at Ashe's scoped in damage falloff. Scoping in increases the minimum falloff distance to 30 meters, allowing her to deal the full 75 damage of her shots at longer distances. After 30 meters, her damage linearly falls off until 50 meters, at which point she only deals 22.5 damage per shot. This damage falloff is one of Ashe's main weaknesses, strongly limiting how conservatively she can position and allowing other characters to outrange her in 1v1s. Here we can see a graph of the damage per second of all the hitscan characters at the time of writing. First, let's take a look at the DPS values without taking reloads into consideration. Ashe's main source of raw DPS is her unscoped fire, so we're using her unscoped DPS values. At 150 DPS, she can't quite compete with the tank melting power of characters like Soldier, Bastion or Reaper, but she can still deal respectable damage when it comes to quickly bursting down an immortality field or anti-naded Roadhog, for example. However, once we start to look at the DPS values with reloads taken into account, Ashe starts to completely break down, barely avoiding a last place position. Her extensive reload time severely reduces her DPS potential over longer sampling periods, meaning that while she can quickly burst down a target when the opportunity presents itself, she isn't suited for long, sustained DPS, like breaking a Reinhardt shield for example. One mistake a lot of Ashe players make is that they severely underutilize her unscoped shots. Her unscoped shots fire significantly faster, meaning that they are excellent for finishing off targets. If you manage to land a headshot on a squishy target at close range, you are often better off simply unscoping and unloading the rest of your clip into the target unscoped. This prevents you from whiffing your scoped shots and temporarily increases your DPS at the expense of reloading downtime afterwards. Also, Don't forget that your unscoped shots don't start experiencing bullet inaccuracy until the third shot. This means that the first 2 shots are perfectly accurate. This means that you can use unscoped shots even at longer ranges to finish off targets without the risk of potentially missing your target due to firing spread. This is especially useful if you need to fire a shot while reloading, since you can cancel the reload and fire with full accuracy, allowing you to react to opportunities around you. Jumping to peek can be useful in situations where you either want to shoot over a piece of cover or in situations where you want to peek a character like Widowmaker. By jumping around a corner, we make it difficult for the enemy to land a headshot on us, which can give us an advantage in a 1v1. While jumping is generally speaking not recommended, there are situations where combining your jump with a peek can be advantageous. Since Ashe fires individual shots, she experiences 0.65 seconds of recovery time in between scope shots. That's time during which we aren't actively shooting anything, meaning that we don't gain anything out of exposing ourselves to the enemy team. One fundamental technique on single shot characters like Ashe is peek shooting, playing around a corner and hiding in between shots. This will require some practice at first, but once you have it down, it's going to significantly increase your survivability, build transferable positioning and mechanical fundamentals, and allow you to win more 1v1 encounters. And lastly, we need to talk about the mechanics of Ashe's reload. Whenever you start to reload, you first have to go through a 0.5 second animation preparing your gun. After that, each individual bullet reload takes 0.25 seconds. This means that we are punished for cancelling our reloads. A full reload from 0 to 12 bullets, if uninterrupted, takes 3.5 seconds. If we interrupted our reload, for example by shooting, then those same 12 shots could take up to 9 seconds, assuming frame-perfect animation cancels. Reloading in one go is the most efficient way to reload. While we do want to squeeze in reloads whenever possible, try to avoid cancelling your reloads unless absolutely necessary. Ashe's Coach Gun is a 10-second cooldown ability that can move Ashe up to 9.4 meters in any direction at a speed of 16 to 18 meters per second. It has a 0.16 second cast time and 0.4 second recovery time until you can shoot again. On top of that, it also fires 15 shotgun pellets, dealing 6 damage each or 90 damage in total if hitting an unarmored opponent at point-blank range. These shots cannot headshot, meaning that we want to maximize the amount of pellets that hit by aiming center mass. One important mistake to avoid is to underestimate the damage potential of Coach Gun. At close range, Coach Gun deals significant damage, allowing you to finish off weakened opponents while disengaging at the same time. At 90 damage, at close range, a single scoped in headshot and point-blank Coach Gun can finish off most squishies in the game. While the mobility it provides is the main use of the ability, its damage output is significant, and you shouldn't miss opportunities to use it for securing kills. Coach Gun also detonates your dynamite. This can be useful if we want to disengage from a fight, like after a Genji, Winston or Doomfist engages on us, and we want to deal some extra damage. Keep in mind that aiming your Coach Gun at the dynamite does not guarantee detonation. One of the pellets actually has to hit the dynamite. In most cases, however, you can use your Coach Gun to detonate your dynamite consistently without risking missing shots with your unscoped or scoped shots. Coach Gun also provides significant utility, not just by providing mobility, but also as a form of crowd control. While the knockback on opponents is not as strong as the self-knockback, it is enough to change the trajectory of a Reinhardt pin, shut down a Genji during his blade after his first dash, or even cancel Mercy Resurrects. You can also use it to delay mobility abilities like Winston's Leap, Hammond's Piledriver, or Doomfist's Seismic Slam. The most common use case of Ashe's Coach Gun is to secure high ground, of course. High ground sacrifices support from your team and can make aiming harder, but it rewards you with cover, extended sightlines, and off-angle pressure. Being able to return to high ground easily gives you a lot of flexibility. You can use your Coach Gun to get on and off high ground, allowing you to adapt during a fight and juke opponents trying to kill you. For example, if a character like Tracer chases you, you can drop from high ground and then coach gun back up to safety. Your coach gun is not just a defensive tool, however. It can also be used aggressively to chase opponents when your team has tempo. If you have a significant numbers advantage and you see your tank dive in to finish the job, you can do a 180 and use your coach gun to chase after opponents and start a snowball. Another use case is that you can use coach gun to get out of spawn quicker as well. Coach gun also allows you to temporarily gain significant verticality, allowing you to finish off targets behind cover. If an enemy is low HP but hides behind a shield or a wall, you can coach gun the ground to launch yourself up in the air and finish the target off. This is especially useful if you land a dynamite on someone behind a Reinhardt shield and want to finish them off with a headshot. Keep in mind that launching yourself up in the air like this also makes you a very easy target to hit, so use this technique with caution. Your coach gun can be used to dodge ultimates, such as Reinhardt's Shatter, or jump out of Sigma's ultimate. Its knockback is also doubled against Genji's Deflect, which allows you to travel quite the distance. Don't forget that this does deal damage to you, however. The coach gun knockback is pretty significant on squishies. On maps such as Ilios Well, you can use it to knock squishies off the map for easy kills. Don't forget that tanks passively are partially resistant to knockbacks. Ashe's Dynamite is an arcing projectile with a 12-second cooldown. It has a 0.16 second cast time and a 0.4 second recovery time before you can start shooting again. It explodes after you shoot at it with your Viper or coach gun, or alternatively detonates on its own after laying on the ground for 2 seconds. Its initial explosion has a 5-meter radius, dealing 50 damage initially at the center, linearly dropping off to 20 damage at the edge. It also applies a debuff on targets hit, dealing 100 damage over 5 seconds at a rate of 20 damage per second. The most important tech to know is that the recovery time of the dynamite perfectly lines up with its arcing trajectory. If you throw your dynamite while stationary, moving horizontally towards it or away from it, without moving your crosshair at all, then the first bullet fired straight after the ability recovery time has ended will detonate it. This way, you can detonate your dynamite very consistently without having to use your coach gun. Learning this range at which the dynamite detonates is crucial because it allows you to hit your dynamite in 1v1 situations consistently and efficiently. Dynamite is considered a proactive ability, meaning that we want to avoid holding onto it. Dynamite should be spammed as much as possible because it applies very significant pressure, deals a ton of damage, and generates significant ult charge for us. We don't need to save it for any specific situations, which means that any second we waste holding onto the ability while it's off cooldown is highly inefficient. You want to keep an eye on your dynamite cooldown and make sure that you use it as soon as possible, ideally lining it up before it's even ready to use yet. It's also important to realize that dynamite does not need to be manually detonated. Manually detonating it requires us to establish line of sight with it, which can be risky. Sometimes you can simply use it to zone. If you see a Hanzo playing a particular corner, for example, simply throwing your dynamite at that corner completely prevents the Hanzo from peeking that position without you even having to face it, removing any risk and allowing you to oppress enemy players. Ashe is immune to 50% of dynamite's damage. While an enemy can take up to 150 damage from a perfectly hit dynamite, Ashe is limited to 75 damage. This is important because there are situations in fights where you may have to detonate your dynamite in close range. For example, a Genji might deflect or a Sigma may use his kinetic grasp. Throwing your dynamite at the ground and detonating it will prevent them from denying the ability while they'll take twice as much damage from it as you do. This is especially strong in situations where you are mercy pocketed and get jumped on by a Genji or Doomfist. Throw your dynamite on the ground and use your coach gun to both detonate it and disengage. Your dynamite also allows you to apply pressure past shields. Throwing it above shields, like Reinhardt's or Sigma's barrier, deals damage and charges your ultimate. One benefit of this is that most players tend to stack on top of each other while playing behind a shield, allowing you to hit massive dynamites and dealing hundreds of damage and farming up to 25% of your ultimate in a single use of the ability. You can also use dynamite to finish off targets who just ran behind cover or behind a shield, allowing you to secure kills on enemies who thought they made it to safety. On top of that, one important piece of information is that health packs not only heal players, but also cleanse them of negative effects. This means that if you're fighting around a health pack, depending on the situation, you may want to hold onto your dynamite until after the enemy has taken the health pack. This way, they can't remove the debuff and have to take the full 100 burn damage. Now that we have covered all of her abilities, let's finally cover Bob, her ultimate. Ashe's ultimate summons Bob, a 1000 HP mobile turret. 0.5 seconds after the ultimate is used, Bob starts charging forward up to 70 meters at a speed of 15 meters per second. If he collides with an enemy during this charge, he deals 120 damage instantly and applies a significant vertical knockback. After Bob collides with something, or finished his 70-meter charge, he deals continuous damage for 10 seconds at a rate of 112 damage per second. The total amount of damage Bob can deal if he fires continuously during his ult is 1092 damage. Ashe's ultimate requires 2240 ultimate points to be charged up. Ashe generates 22.4 ult points every 4.48 seconds, meaning that it would take 7 minutes and 28 seconds to farm the ultimate entirely passively. Each point of damage you deal against a non-tank unarmored opponent equates to 1 ultimate point. Keep in mind that tanks give reduced ult charge and armor reduces damage taken by 30%. So you may need significantly more than 2240 damage to farm your ultimate in worst case scenarios. If we compare her ultimate cost with a selection of other characters, we can see that it is one of the most costly ultimates. That said, the dynamite, if used properly, allows her to generate significant amounts of ult charge, meaning that in practice you'll get your ultimate more frequently than this chart indicates. While it doesn't quite reach the cost to value ratio of the #1 ultimate in the game currently, Sombra's EMP, it's definitely one of the best ultimates in the game if used properly, capable of winning teamfights single-handedly. It's important to abuse the knockup on Ashe's Bob. It's easy to simply throw your Bob randomly towards the enemy team, but missing out on the knockup and 120 damage when Bob collides with an enemy is a big mistake. If you hit a squishy with your Bob, you can simply follow up with a dynamite or a few unscoped body shots to finish them off while they're in the air. This way, you can get a kill using Bob even if he immediately gets slapped or hacked after. Keep in mind that Bob's 10-second duration doesn't start until after he begins shooting. This means that cutting his charge short by throwing him against a wall doesn't increase the damage potential Bob can do. That said, there are benefits to having Bob apply pressure a bit earlier. If he charges the full distance, he's not doing anything for almost 5 seconds, which can give the enemy team plenty of time to start a counter-engage on your team. It's important to place Bob where you think he's going to generate the most value, meaning that he needs open sightlines to squishies and needs to be in a location the enemy team can't simply rotate or hide from. Bob is treated as a player character when it comes to contesting objectives. This is incredibly useful because Bob can be used either to contest or to apply point pressure. If you are trying to capture a point, you can throw your Bob at the objective to force the enemy team to contest him, for example. Or if the round is about to end and you want to touch the point to trigger overtime, throwing Bob at the point prevents your team from having to rush on the point one by one and dying instantly. When Bob is used, he actually spawns 5 meters in front of Ashe. This means that if Bob is used while hiding behind cover, he will actually land in front of the cover. Keep in mind that Bob doesn't spawn at an infinite height. This means that this only works with small pieces of cover. Bob also cannot be spawned on high ground by standing below the ledge. If you want to place Bob on high ground, you'll have to use your coach gun to lift yourself up and then use Bob. Using this technique allows you to use Bob in situations where you may be low HP and don't want to expose yourself to the enemy team until you're healed back up. Bob's charge is treated as a regular player charge, meaning that it interacts with abilities like Reinhardt's charge, Doomfist's punch, or Brigitte's shield bash. This can be abused by both us as well as the enemies. For example, a Brigitte might prevent Bob from executing his knockup upon player collision by cancelling it with her shield bash, making her a less attractive target for Bob. On the other hand, we can also use Bob to save our teammates. For example, if one of our teammates gets charged, we can use Bob to cancel the charge and keep them alive. Bob also interacts with Symmetra's teleporter. While this interaction is rather niche, it can be used to launch Bob at unpredictable angles and allow him to reach positions he normally wouldn't be able to. If you have a Symmetra on your team, look for opportunities where you can use her teleporter. The teleporter is also excellent to dodge an enemy Ana's sleep dart. She may fire too early, only for Bob to disappear after running over the teleport. This interaction is not commonly known, so it can catch quite a few players off guard. Bob applies the most pressure when he is attacking the enemy team from an angle separate than your own. The enemy team will struggle positioning. Being attacked from multiple angles makes using cover to limit your exposure to enemy sidelines difficult. By placing Bob behind the enemy team, we can also surprise enemies who, after being brought down to low HP, retreat and fall back to recover, only to be greeted by a Bob who finishes them off. Bob is also great because of his auto-aim, making him excellent at killing hard-to-hit targets like Tracer, Lucio, or Genji. Bob doesn't provide players who hit or heal him with any ult charge. The only way to get ult charge off of Bob is by damage boosting him as Mercy. This is important because it means that we don't have to worry about giving the enemy team significant ult charge whenever we use him. On top of that, even if he dies, he generates significant value. Remember, 1000 damage that got pumped into Bob is 1000 damage that didn't get pumped into the rest of your team, and 1000 damage that your supports don't have to heal up. Bob is one of the few ultimates in Overwatch that allow the player to generate ult charge while the ultimate is active, alongside Hanzo, Torbjorn, Tracer, and Wrecking Ball. All other characters won't start generating ult charge until their ultimates despawned. This is a significant advantage and one of the main reasons why the enormous 2240 ultimate cost of Bob in reality is much smaller, since you simply spend more time during the game farming ult charge, while other characters have to wait until their ults finish before they can begin charging another ultimate. Anchoring is a positioning technique where instead of positioning relative to the map, we choose a teammate who provides us with space as an anchor to position relative to. There are two kinds of anchors, stable anchors and volatile anchors. A character like Reinhardt, for example, is a very stable anchor, meaning that the space he creates is predictable. He cannot change the amount of space he controls quickly, since he lacks the mobility to disengage spontaneously, and his large health pool, protective armor, and shield barrier prevent him from dying quickly, meaning that we can anticipate when he is going to gain or lose space. A character like Doomfist, on the other hand, is a very volatile anchor. He can die spontaneously, for example if he gets rotor hooked, and he can disengage at any moment, leaving us stranded in now uncontrolled space. The main advantages of anchoring are the reduced cognitive load, since a lot of the positioning decisions are made by our anchor. They decide where we position, when we push up, and when we fall back. The main downside of anchoring is that it's fairly conservative, meaning that if our team is getting outperformed by the enemy team, we may not be able to apply enough pressure to compensate and carry the game. Anchoring should ideally be done in situations where you want to play safely, consistently, and don't feel like you need to hard carry in order to win the fight. High ground is any part of the map that allows us to play from a position that's elevated. The main advantages of high ground are the improved sightlines we have, the fact that we can use the ledge of the high ground as cover, and that we are difficult to reach by characters who lack vertical mobility. The main downside of high ground is that we are difficult to heal because it could split us from our team. A Moira or a Baptiste could struggle healing us if we are on high ground alone. Against very mobile dive compositions, high ground can also isolate us, making us an easy target to dive. And lastly, it can make aiming more difficult, since the enemy can move in a two-dimensional space rather than one-dimensional. High ground positions allow us to apply significant pressure. They should be used in situations where other teammates are also on high ground, giving us the support we need, or in situations where a more conservative playstyle failed to generate enough value to win. Off angles and flanks are high risk, high reward positions. An off angle simply describes any position where our angle of attack is different from our team. Whether an off angle is considered a flanking position depends on whether we can disengage from the fight safely. If we are playing slightly to the side of our team, we are in an off angle position. Whereas if we are somewhere behind the enemy, we are on a flank, since we have no clear disengage path anymore that doesn't cross the enemy team's sideline. The main advantage of off angles is that they apply immense amounts of pressure. Especially in lower ranks, dealing with off angles is incredibly difficult. You draw a lot of attention towards yourself and alleviate pressure from your team. This increased pressure is amplified for flanks, since the angle of attack is even more extreme. The main downside of off angles is that they are high risk. Flanks, completely cutting us off and forfeiting any opportunity to disengage, is the riskiest way you can position, but it also allows you to hard carry. Playing off angles or flanks is only recommended in situations where all else failed, where you need to play extremely risky to secure picks and apply enough pressure to compensate for the advantage the enemy team has over you. For example, if you anticipate that the enemy team will have a significant ult advantage in an upcoming fight, or if the enemy team have a smurf that's causing your team issues. Ashe generates value and wins games through two avenues. On one hand, she is excellent at securing picks and generating numbers advantages. On the other hand, she can charge her high impact ult extremely quickly and use Bob to win teamfights. When it comes to securing picks, the two most important factors are risk management and target selection. Risk management refers to the way we position and take fights. Securing picks is a balancing act. On one hand, we want to secure a pick before the enemy team gets a chance to do so. On the other hand, if we play too risky at a time where that risk simply wasn't needed, we could die and end up being the one getting picked rather than the one doing the picks. We have to take into account both teams' ult economies, space they control, as well as how previous fights went to evaluate how much risk we are willing to take. If your team has multiple advantages and you've won most of your fights so far, you should be more risk averse. If your team's been getting stomped so far, we want to be a risk taker. The second factor is target selection. To secure picks, we need to evaluate targets on a few criteria: threat, mobility, and vulnerability. High threat targets like Hanzo or Widowmaker are difficult to focus, because peeking them not only has a chance of securing us a pick, but also of securing them a pick. High mobility characters like Lucio or Tracer are very difficult to hit, meaning that we run the risk of spamming multiple shots at them without landing any, causing us to apply zero pressure and not getting any picks. And low vulnerability targets, such as tanks or characters with defensive cooldowns like Moira's Fade, are difficult to pick because they have enough time to react to the damage they receive and prevent us from closing out the kill. Examples of good characters to focus are Ana, Cassidy or Junkrat. Their limited range prevents them from being a big threat to us, so we can peek them safely. They lack mobility, and in the case of Ana, actually move slower while scoped in, which makes them easy to hit. And they have limited defensive cooldowns to save themselves, meaning that if we get them low, we can usually finish them off and secure the pick. Examples of bad characters to focus are characters like Orisa, Tracer or Lucio. While we shouldn't completely ignore them, characters like this should only be focused when an opportunity presents itself. Orisa has 2 strong defensive cooldowns, a large health pool, and protective armor, making her a difficult target to take down. If we see that she used both cooldowns, is discorded and anti-naded however, focusing her is a no-brainer. Tracer has a recall and is very mobile. If we see her use her recall however, she becomes much more vulnerable, meaning that we can kill her. Lucio on the other hand is very mobile and has self-heals, meaning that we want to avoid focusing him unless he's already low HP or there simply is no other better target for us to focus. And there we have it. Everything you need to know to play Ashe at the highest level. If you like this guide, I invite you to visit my website ioslux.com, where you can take advantage of the professional coaching services I've been offering for years to hundreds of clients. Like and subscribe to support the channel and join the Discord server in the description to become a part of our community. My name is ioslux and I'd like to thank you for learning.